Hey, what's up everyone? It's Joe from BadSeed Tech, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the Dan Clark Audio E3. Now, this is a $2,000 closed-back planar magnetic headphone. It's a pretty insane headphone. I have a lot to say about this, but I do want to disclose a couple things first. It was not sent to me by Dan Clark Audio or any other brand or company. This was actually sent to me as a loan from Brian over at BadSeed Tech. He runs an awesome YouTube channel. I've become pretty good friends with him. So if you're a follower of my channel and you haven't subscribed to his before, I will have a link in the description below. Definitely worth a look. I think he makes some awesome content, and a lot of that has kind of motivated me and helped inspire me to make some of my content on my own. So huge thank you to Brian. This will get sent back after the review is done. I get obviously no kickbacks from him or anything. But anyway, with that being said, I want to talk about a few basics. So I mentioned that this is a closed-back, which means it's going to block out a lot of exterior sound. In fact, the noise isolation is quite good on this. It's also a planar, and that has a few pros and cons. Now, as far as the specs go, it's a 27 ohm impedance, and this being a planar, the impedance or electrical impedance is basically flat, meaning that if you have a higher output impedance amplifier or a low output impedance amplifier, it won't really alter frequency response at all. In fact, you'll get more of an altering of frequency response just by placing this in a different spot on your head. The sensitivity rating is also at 90 decibels, so it's not the easiest to drive. I think 90 is on the lower side for some people. I feel like this benefits from a more powerful amp. I certainly wouldn't want to connect this to something like a $10 Apple dongle and feel like you're going to get more out of it. It does benefit from some higher stuff. Having said that, though, there are a few chains that I liked that worked really well with this, and it shows that you don't have to spend too much to get more volume. Now, one of those is the SMSL Raw MDA1. This is a $300 all-in-one amp DAC. It has balanced outputs, it has coaxial and analog, and it has optical, and it works as a USB-C to your host. So it's nice. It has balanced output. It has a single, quarter-inch output as well. This comes with two different cables, but even at $300, I felt that this got more than loud enough. So I don't want you to, hear the term of it needs more power and feel like you have to spend an insane amount of money. Something with, a couple watts would be great, but it's not necessary. Now, as far as what's included in the box, I want to start with this real quick. I've been pretty much using the standard quarter-inch cable. Now, the connectors, I'll show you how to attach them in a second. This is a really robust cable, but it looks thick and heavy. It's actually surprisingly light. It's just a very high quality jacket. No microphonics issues, very, very flexible. It does not like to tangle. Honestly, it's a wonderful cable. Now you have a totally different cable, at least that you can spec. When you buy yours, you have different cable options you can select online. Some of them alter the price a little bit. This particular one uses a mini XLR, which is of course balanced, and it came with a mini XLR to 4.4 or Pentacon connection, which some amps I have only have balanced outputs, so it was kind of nice to have this as a fallback. Otherwise, I was pretty much always using the quarter-inch. Now, in addition to the cables, you get a pouch to hold the cables together, so that'll take care of that. And then you have this compact case. Now, you can see that it's not too wide width-wise, but there is some depth to it. And it's an interesting way to pack. So it comes with this little it looks almost 3D printed, but basically you have this spacer to kind of preserve the integrity of the pads. And because this cup is angled, you want to make sure that this is angled as well, that you place the open or wider side towards the back. Then I'm literally just going to press this in. You can see this kind of compress, and you really want to make sure this is nice and tight. And look how small that gets. Then I place that in the case. I'm going to just kind of work it in there, and you can see it's literally just enough room for the headphone itself. I wouldn't try to jam this cable in here and think that you're going to fit it all, but that's all you have to do to stow it and then zip it up and you're good to go. So it's a pretty compact case. There's different ways you could view this as far as what kind of shape you're looking for. I don't think too many people are going to be traveling with this, but that's how you stow it. Now, as far as how you connect it, these things are freaking indestructible. They are like tanks. So all you have to do when you put this on, you can kind of feel it click in or go in a certain way, and if I just push, you can hear that, and that's like solid. It's not coming off. Having said that, you don't want to really do this, but just keep in mind if you snag it on something, there's no breakaway here. That cable is going to take the headphone wherever it goes. So to remove, all I have to do is pull this down, and it is like a quick release. So pretty good cable design. A lot of this is built with quality and longevity in mind. So having said that, the build quality of this headphone is absolutely fantastic. I feel like this thing is going to last a very long time. This suspension strap design is self-adjusting, so you don't have to mess with anything, and it's weighted really well. Now, this headphone is not too heavy. The clamp force for a closeback is also pretty moderate, and I can wear this for a long period of time. Now, my particular head shape, these pads, if I do wear this for a while, my pressure point for this particular headphone puts a little pressure right here on my jaw. I'm not a huge fan of that. I have this issue with certain Sennheiser headphones. You can lift it slightly, and that greatly reduces the pressure on my jaw and comfort. So if you have the same sensitivity, maybe just lift it slowly and the headband will kind of suspend it. I don't wear these with a hat. This is just for the video, but I want to say that. Now, another note, while I'm lifting this, just to let you know, we'll talk about frequency response and sound quality later, but lifting this reduces like roughly 3 to 4 kilohertz range, maybe 2 to 5 a little bit. So if you find it a little bit hot there, play around with the positioning. Closebacks are very sensitive to placement, some more so than others. This one is affected more on the higher frequencies, but the way this was designed is it's not impacted as much on the low frequencies depending on how you place it. It's a pretty consistent bass delivery. So the ergonomics and the chassis design are great. Now, as far as the looks goes, you have this glass outer shell on the ear cup and then these dual bass ports here. This is here to control the bass. It's to make sure it's not too boomy or bloated. And this glass is actually Gorilla Glass, which is really cool, and I didn't know that. So while it might look like a shiny plastic, Gorilla Glass is extremely durable. It shouldn't crack, and it will be resistant to scratches as well. So it's kind of a smart way to put something reflective but also durable that, you know, it's like pros and cons of glass and acrylic all in one. So the Gorilla Glass is pretty sweet. Pads are quite large. I mean, these things are absolutely massive. So I don't really feel like you're going to have any issues with fitment on this. And if you look at it in terms of millimeters, I mean, I'm at 54 millimeters, maybe if you round down 52 millimeters on this inside part here. And on the height, I'm getting over 70 millimeters. That's one of the largest cups I've measured. The depth is also pretty insane. You get 30 millimeters of depth on the back side. And on the front, we're getting closer to about 26, 27 millimeters without compression. Now, because these are fairly compliant and it has a relatively light clamp force considering the weight and overall pressure points and everything, and because of the way it's designed for bass consistency, you can wear these with glasses as well. Not the most comfortable headphone I've ever worn with larger frame glasses, but it's surprisingly good. And for a closeback with this kind of performance, to me, it's totally acceptable. Now, getting into sound quality, I want to start with objective measurements first. It takes my opinion out of it, and it just shows you how my rig measures this headphone in a particular seating position. Now, I lift and place it back on the rig numerous times because seating it differently does affect frequency response. Then I average that out. And it's a minimum of 3 measurements depending on the variance. If the variance is quite large, then I'll do 4 or 5 at minimum unless there's some, weird stuff going on. So this is, again, how my rig measures it. Don't use my, which is a Gross KB006X Pinaclone IEC 711 coupler. Don't use my measurement to compare to someone else's B&K 5128. It's not going to be the same, but at least you can compare my measurements to other ones I've done on my site, which is hosted by another YouTuber, Super Review. He's kind enough to help kind of support the back end so other reviewers can use this. So be sure to check his channel out as well. Now, taking a look at the measurements, you can see that the E3 measures really well. Like if you are a person chasing a Harman compliant or a Harman tuned headphone, this about executes that as good as possible, especially in a closeback. The performance is absolutely incredible. And again, it depends on placement too. So you can see a little bit of a peak at this like 2800, 2600 hertz that goes into 3K. I observed that as well, but a lot of that is placement on your head. So if you find this area a little bit hot, before you do EQ, maybe just pick it up just a little bit. Otherwise, the overall bass extension is fantastic. It carries all the way down into the sub-bass region and below 20 hertz. You have a little bit of a lift here at close to 100 hertz, which helps kind of add a touch of warmth, but there's no boxiness or bloat. It's a very clean, but very depth-worthy, in-depth bass delivery, and you could see that on the sub-bass extension. Now, overall tonality in the mid-range is fantastic. There's a very slight recess. Again, my rig compared to the Harman curve, at least for how it's aligned. But I really don't find anything jarring or uncomfortable to listen to. There's no sibilance issues. There's no spikes anywhere. I also don't find any particular area lacking. It's tastefully filled in all the way from the sub bass to the high treble. Now, in terms of subjective sound quality and how I perceived it, what I enjoyed about it, etc., I want to kind of start with a storyline of how I perceived this sound and how my perception kind of evolved over multiple listening sessions at shows and long-term listening and A/Bing against a lot of other things with a lot of different music. The first impression I got when I put an E3 on is, wow, that bass is fantastic. And it's not because it was a ton of bass. It was just tastefully elevated to an extent, but with no real issues as a result. I didn't find any bloat. I didn't find it coloring vocals. I didn't find it lacking, too boomy. When the bass needed to be deep, it was deep. And when it needed to have some punch, there were some good dynamics to it. That was the first thing I noticed. And I didn't pay as much attention to the other things for a while because I was like, damn, this bass is amazing. So then I fast forward a little bit. I start listening to it more and I'm like, okay, I'm not finding any real issues, but it's also not incredibly exciting either. And this is one of the, I think, mistakes some consumers make in general. It's like going to the store and finding a TV cranked up on vivid at maximum brightness and the colors pop and everything looks great at first, but then you go home and you start watching movies and all of a sudden skin tones are more orange or pink or the grass is radioactive green. And it's not as natural. And it's the same thing with audio because sometimes you might hear this elevated treble and sparkle and pizzazz, if you will, and it does sound fun and exciting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in some cases, that can be too much, and that lack of trueness to the original sound can sometimes color it in a negative way. And then on the flip side of that, of course, if you are listening to something that's relatively boring or mastered to be very neutral and let's just say straight, nothing crazy going on, this isn't going to magically wake that song up either. It stays truer to the source than most headphones do. And then with that bass delivery, it has honestly a pretty surprising level of bass extension and tactility. There's really good dynamic punch to it. So I listen to it more and more, then I start listening to rock. I'm like, okay, this actually does rock pretty well. The only thing I had with it is I found it just a little bit hot, just a touch of shout without EQ. If I just kept putting it on and didn't think about placement, the natural placement settles it right where there's a little bit of a peak for me, which didn't work as well for rock. Some people are going to want that. They want zing with heavy metal, for example. But I don't like that to be too forward in that region. I need it to be a little bit more relaxed, especially if you're listening to it at moderate to higher volumes. Now, more listening goes on and I start listening to more of my audiophile demo tracks. I don't listen to the audiophile test tracks first. Even though I'm intimately familiar with them, the first thing I do is just start playing what I'm in the mood for at that time. You know, whatever playlist I have that I've been kind of jamming out to, I'll start listening to that, whether it's new or old. And then I start pivoting into more familiar stuff, and that's where things start to stand out. And it's interesting because even though it's a slightly darker sounding presentation, only because it's so smooth, you don't realize how good the technicalities are until you start listening to stuff that you're more familiar with, at least for me. That's how my evolution happened. And I was noticing that certain songs that had occlusion effects to sound like it wasn't present in front of you, I legitimately thought that my source output or my output from my laptop, my Mac, when it was connected to the DAC, I thought it switched off from the DAC and was playing on the Mac speakers for a minute because I had these on. And again, this track had an occlusion effect to make it sound like something was in the way. And I was like, holy crap, everyone's sleeping and my laptop's cranked right now. And it was just the headphone perfectly mimicking the engineer's occlusion effect. That has never happened to me before. It tripped me out. I did it twice, and I legitimately did this a couple times just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. That's some dark magic stuff, and it was truly incredible. And as you listen to things that get more complex and more layered and more detailed, what I really like about the E3 is the ability to deliver those nuances in such a subtle way that it's not cheating you by elevating the treble. And that is a masterful act. Now, if you are not so sensitive in the treble region, you may find this a little bit too dark or veiled because some people need elevated treble. You can always EQ this up because another byproduct of the E3 and the way this was engineered, it takes EQ exceptionally well. Don't add a massive bass shelf, but you can lift the bass even more. And whether you're trying to get more in the mids or less in the upper mids, or maybe you want more high treble extension to kind of open up the soundstage a little bit, perceived soundstage, you can do that and it handles it with basically no distortion. So it's a really flexible headphone. So I want to get into a couple comparisons, or I guess 3 comparisons, and I have the Meze Lyric 2, wonderful headphone that I've covered in the past. This is the ZMF Atrium Closed, also a wonderful headphone, and it's very different flavor. And then I have the Caldera Closed, which has been, I don't want to say up until this point because I still have preferences between these guys, but this has blown me away. It's a $4,000 flagship, of course. It's a more expensive headphone, at least depending on your configuration. Now I purchased, if you can see it on camera, barely, I purchased a ZMF Caldera Open, and Zach sent me the closed because I think he wants me to buy another headphone from him and he knew I would like it. But that's a whole nother story. Now all of these have pros and cons, so I want to start comparing the basics. The Meze Lyric 2 is one of those headphones that when the stars align, and I love this removable pad, this not so much is easily removable as this, but the Lyric 2 is one of those things where when the stars align and you have the right track, it really sings, and I still stand by my review in the past. I didn't have an E3 to compare it to. I think as far as listening to 10 genres of music, if you listen to 10 different styles of music and they're all over the place with how they're mastered and how they sound, the Dan Clark E3 is a more flexible headphone. It's going to handle that wide variety better. Then there'll be a few tracks where you listen to the Lyric 2, and to you, this may sound like a very magical delivery. And I think this is where the coloration starts to become a factor here in what you're trying to achieve. The Lyric 2 has much more upper treble extension. It has more of a glistening effect, and in some cases, more of a metallic effect. And if that's what you want, or you want a little bit more zing to metallic instruments, the Lyric 2 is going to be more forward and present more perceived detail that way because it has emphasized frequencies in those areas. Now at the same time, I found a different tonality shift in vocals, particularly in male vocals, whereas this had just a tiniest amount of shout, and this one had a little bit more breathiness to it. It wasn't a drastic change, nothing EQ couldn't tame on both of them. But because of this upper treble, when I listen to You and Your Friends by Dire Straits, it's a wonderful song for audio demos, whether it's speaker or headphones. And when the lead singer's voice cuts in and out of the mix, on the Lyric 2, because of the way it's tuned, you can actually hear the microphone preamp gain, like the little bit of a hiss from them activating that mic or feeding that recording back into the mix. It's exposed more on this. Now that that stands out, you can listen to it critically on this or the Caldera, for example, and you can still hear it to an extent, but not to the same level as this. So if you're trying to listen to it as in a very analytical way, this might present a little bit more in that regard. Bass is still quite fantastic. There's a really nice bass shelf with the Lyric 2. It doesn't, in certain tracks, the Lyric 2 will sound like it has more bass. In other tracks, particularly in rock music, I feel that the E3 has a more dynamic punch to it. So if you want more of a hit in your bass and not just your extension or overall emphasis, I think the E3 is going to do dynamics just a little bit better. I find the comfort of the Lyric 2 excellent, which again, this goes into the whole head shape thing. Some people think the E3 is the most comfortable headphone they've ever worn. I didn't find it uncomfortable, but the Lyric 2's, the way this is designed, just happens to fit my head a little bit better, just the shape of it. I can wear both of these for a long period of time, but if I A/B it, I feel the pressure more evenly distributed on the Lyric 2, again, for my head shape and how I wear it. Then you get the Atrium Closed, which is the most colored sound here because it's got a lot more mid-bass. You could call it bloat. It's a little bit heavier in that range, but to me, the magic with the Atrium Closed really shines on a good tube amp. It's just an absolutely it's almost an unforgettable experience if you hear the right song with something like this with a good tube amp. It's just a blast. And yeah, it's not going to sound as true to neutral as some other headphones I've used, but if I want to rock out and listen to a ton of different rock songs of all different kinds and mastering, the Atrium Closed, even though I know it doesn't sound exactly like that in real life, it's just so much fun to listen to. And so I think if you want more of the sub-bass extension, the E3 is still going to have it. If dynamics are your thing, like straight up just you want a headphone that punches, the Atrium Closed is really something else. It has good tonality overall, and pad rolling makes a big difference, but it's not going to be as neutral or everyday sound signature as something like the E3. Now, getting into the Caldera Closed, This kind of blends a little bit of what I like about the Atrium Closed and a little bit of what I like about the E3. Now, if anything, it's probably the best blend of all of the others together because it has really good dynamic punch, sounds really clear and resolving, it has more energy and more, to me, the treble reads as a little bit more bright and zingy is the E3, but the vocals are more relaxed on the Caldera Closed. The vocals have a little bit more bite and presence to them on the E3. I think this is more close again to the original recording, but as far as like everyday listening goes, I don't mind having a relaxed presentation in like the 3 to 5K. I really haven't looked at the measurements of this in a while, but when I listen to music, certain things just sound a little bit more relaxed. And even though the bass shelf isn't as strong on the Caldera, because vocals are more relaxed, you can still have a perceived stronger bass. The only difference is it's just accompanied by a little bit more air and treble extension. Wonderful headphone. Love listening to this with, again, mixed genres. I think the edge for like EDM and rap and a lot of sub bass, I still like the way the E3's bass delivery is, and then more of the acoustic and punchiness to it. I lean a little bit more towards the Caldera, but it's, you know, almost twice the price. I think some people will like either one more than the other. It really comes down to preference. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite. I hate picking favorites because it's like saying what's your favorite food and then you're going to eat that food forever. Just, you know, even if filet mignon is delicious, sometimes sea bass is a great way to change it up, right? If we could only dream to have that every other day. But flavors aren't the worst thing out there, especially if you have more than one headphone, and I think it's really important to know what flavor you're looking for and which ones you don't like. What makes the E3 an amazing headphone is it's a rewarding, highly technical, scalable headphone that happens to accommodate damn near any flavor profile with very little offense in any particular area. That's the magic of the E3, and it's not going to do anything that's going to revolutionize your sound, but if you have a big collection and you still want your everyday daily driver, I think the E3 is easily one of the top picks to use for an everyday listen. Doesn't matter if it's gaming, doesn't matter if it's music or movies, it's just super flexible. I think this might be my favorite Dan Clark headphone I've heard. I've listened to the Stealth and the Expanse, and I've heard those on much more expensive amps, and I think those have kind of woke those headphones up a little bit. They're nice headphones in their own way, but for the equipment I own at my house, I think I would just prefer to stay with the E3. And this kind of shows that, you know, closebacks aren't always bad. These are all wonderful closebacks in different ways. Hell, the FIO FT3 at $150 is one of the best valued headphones I've ever heard. And the fact that this at $2,000 can still be considered as a good value is showing how good this headphone is. A lot of it has to do with the technicality, tuning, comfort, build quality. It's pretty exceptional. And I think if that kind of fits your budget, this might be one of the best closebacks under $2,000 if you just want one headphone for everything. If you already have something that's really bright and sparkly and you want something different, this is still a great pick, but oops, wrong one. So is the Atrium Closed, because this is going to be the opposite of sparkly and bright, and it's going to have great dynamics and punch, and a little bit thicker sound. So find what you're looking for. I hope this video helped you kind of get more about what the E3 is all about, what I thought of it anyway. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next one. With that being said, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.